Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Theater on Monday Talk Series, where we discuss the essence of theater. Storytelling is one of humankind's oldest pastimes. Steve Carver is going to come out and talk to us about how we have evolved to love storytelling.
They say that storytelling is the oldest art form known to mankind. Certainly, since man has discovered languages, he's been telling stories to each other, telling each other stories to inform, to pass along information, and of course in the theater to entertain. In fact, documentation goes way back to the first time that they ever discovered when man first started documenting their storytelling. They were found in the caves of the Pyrenees, in the Pyrenees Mountains. Over 15,000 years ago, BC, is when the first documentation of storytelling started to exist. So man has been telling stories since the beginning of time, it seems. And so the interesting thing is through the years that man has evolved, and through the years that technology has evolved, why is storytelling so important? I mean, if you look at what we've done as a culture, as a race, as a species, we have created all different forms of ways of telling stories. And they're no different than they were 15,000 years ago. Topics have changed, sure, and there's certainly different ways that we communicate, but the essence and the art of storytelling still exists as it did a long time ago. So why? Why is storytelling so incredibly important to the human race? I believe that it's because the human being has the God-given ability, the natural instinct to be able to communicate an experience to another human being in such a way that the person who's listening or the audience can actually partake in the experience from the teller. We've all heard stories where a friend has come to us and said, you would never believe what happened to me, and they go on this endless story about what just happened to them. Something that might have changed the way they look at life for that brief period of time. And for that moment in time, you, me, whoever's listening is actually in the existence, immersed into their story. For a moment, we're there with them. This is a total trait that is only unique to the human race, because you don't see dogs talking to each other and sharing in each other's experiences and lives, but human beings, absolutely. And that's why through the evolution of man and with all the grand technology, we still go back to one thing. And that is the shared experience from one person to another person. That's why we read books, right? You read books because then you can immerse yourself in the fiction of that book. You can for a minute transcend time and be a part of that story. That's why you go to the movies. That's why we listen to the radio, right? When you listen to the old radio programs, we can see it all in our mind's eye because we hear it going on and we're using our imagination. And of course, that's why we come to the theater, to partake in the story that's being told. We all know it works. And so how does it work? Why is it important? Why is storytelling, the art of storytelling, so important in the world of live theater? Well, you can ask the question, why does a patron pay a ticket price to come in and sit right where you are all now, sitting and watch a show? Why? Well, some sure want to come in and be entertained. I'm sure we're not going to have a shared experience of some Broadway musical, but it's an entertaining thing. But then there are other pieces of theater where we come in and we're actually seeing a human experience. And for the hour and a half or 2 hours that we paid to get, we expect to sit and immerse ourselves in the experience that is the play, of the characters of the play. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. The art of storytelling is in such a way that you are immersed in a story that I'm about to tell. The story that I'm about to tell is absolutely true. Everything I'm going to tell you happened to me personally. It's an absolute true story. Okay? Happened to me when I was 19 years old. I was in North Carolina at that time. I was doing a show in North Carolina, and my grandfather had been diagnosed with cancer and only had a few days to live. So over the July 4th weekend, my family said, hey, this might be the time, since you're not going to be working, to come and see Grandpa the last time, because he doesn't have very long to live. And I thought, okay. So I got on a plane and flew to Michigan and went to see my family. And I expected, when I walked in the house, I expected to see everybody very sad, very downhearted, very maudlin. And what I walked into that evening was, around the dinner table, was my family. And my grandmother, my little tough old broad of a grandmother in her wheelchair, sitting at the table, enjoying her little drink of bourbon. And everybody seemed to be having a good time. Everybody seemed to be talking. Everybody seemed to be not acknowledging what we're really doing here. And for me, it was very strange, because I was coming in thinking, okay, this is going to be really serious, it's going to be really hard. And yet it was not that at all. It was very much a pitter-patter, and like people were not acknowledging what was really happening. So that evening after dinner, my father and I got my grandmother out of the wheelchair into the car, and we went down to Borges Hospital, and we walked up to see my grandfather, and there he was. And he looked fine, sitting there talking. His eyes were bright, and we talked for a few minutes, and we spent a half hour with him, and we went home that night because he got tired and it was time to go home, and we said goodnight and see you tomorrow, and we walked home. We drove home, and it just seemed weird the next day when I got up, because I only had one more day before I had to leave and go back to North Carolina, and I thought, this is so unusual. And so that evening, again, around the dinner table, my family gathered, and we had the family conversation. It was lighthearted banter. And that evening, my father and I, again, loaded up my grandmother into the wheelchair, wheeled her out, put her in the car, and we drove down to the hospital. And parked in the garage, and we got Grandma into the wheelchair, and my dad was pushing her down the thing, and I was walking down next to her. And it was one of those hospitals that was built probably in 1940 or 1930. The kind that I'm talking about, the kind that have tile that go all along the floor and then up the walls. And they have dim lighting all the way. And it's a really wide hallway and echoes. And as we walked, you could hear our footsteps echoing against the tile. And the hallway seemed like endlessly, and it's huge and it's wide, and everything seemed to echo. And it was so dark, because this was a remote hallway of the hospital, that we seemed so lonely, and it seemed so cold walking down and wheeling this little old lady and going to see my grandfather. And as we got about 3/4 down, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I hear my mother shriek way down the other end of the hallway. I never heard my mother shriek like this at all. We left her at home. She's not supposed to be here. But I heard her all the way down, and we stopped. And we looked back, and we were stunned to see my mother running down the hall. And she yelled, "Jim!" I'll never forget my mom. I've never heard that before. And we stopped and we looked. And here she comes running, and she stopped about, 25, maybe 25 yards, seemed forever away. And my father said, "Stay here." And he went back to talk to my mother. And Grandma's like, "What's happening? What's happening?" I said, I don't know what's going on. And the two of them are back there talking. And my mother's very animated. And my father's like this. And then 1 minute later, he's like this. And that's when I knew that my grandfather had died. Okay, scene. That story is very real to me, because I tell this story at every first rehearsal I have with a crew to talk about how important it is to use imagery in the work that we do as actors. Okay? So what does storytelling and all this have to do with it? Well, for the minute that we talked about this story, we were all together right there in the hallway. You heard the echo the feet against the tile. You've probably felt the dark coldness of the long hallway and the width and all that, and how solely alone you feel when you're in those kinds of institutions. And for sure, you probably were all with me when you heard my mom yelling down the hall. You probably could see her in your mind's eye, and certainly saw then my father's pain when he learned that his father died. For a minute there, we were all together. The audience and me. I shared an experience, and you lived that experience with me for just that brief moment. And so what does this have to do with acting? Well, I think it's the essence of what we are supposed to do as actors. I think this is exactly what acting is about. And I know, because I've been an actor for a long time. I've started out as a kid, and I worked my way up to being a professional, and I developed a really good bag of tricks. I just like every other actor I've ever known, man, getting cast in a play is a magical thing. Boy, you get your script, you get your highlighter, you go through and you highlight all your lines, and then you go back and you count them all just to see how important you really are in the show. I know, we all do it. I do it too. And then when we sit together, or when we sit at night when we're reading our lines, we often sit there and go, I know exactly how to say this line. Oh, I know this. I could say this line beautifully. It's going to work. It's going to make people cry, And in a sense, what I'm doing, without fully realizing it, is I'm imposing my little bag of tricks on what the playwright has given me. I am sitting there thinking, I know better. I've got a great bag of tricks. I've developed it for 30 years. It should be good. And yet, it wasn't until I started directing other actors that I had the painful realization that for my entire acting career, I was actually doing it wrong. And I had to confess that to myself, that in fact what I was doing was I spent years crafting how I was going to say things so that it sounded good to me. Okay, and I thought I was good because I could say it in such a dramatic way and everybody be so thrilled with it. But what I was doing was I was creating an experience based on superficial aspects of how I spoke, rather than what the author had given me. And you see, that's where I think we make a lot of mistakes as actors. And I only know this now because I've been directing and I've been teaching actors for a while. And so for me, the important part for the actor, one of the most important parts the actor can have in their work, because there's so many things you have to do. But one of the hardest things that the actor has to do is the actor has to go through and create all the imagery that the author has given you to play. That's what he's not giving you the lines. I'm famous for my rehearsals amongst actors is, as a patron, I don't pay to see you talk. I pay to see you think. Now, why would I say that? Well, this is why I say that. And it goes back to the art of storytelling. If I'm given a monologue about a person that I have to talk about, let's say I have a monologue about an ex-lover, and we've been together forever, and it was a traumatic experience. Now, it's never happened to me personally. This is in the script. It didn't happen to me. I'm not telling you, go and find a piece of your life and see if it fits and then try to think of that every night of the performance. No. I'm going to make it a lot easier for you. All you have to do, and it's as simple as this, is if you have a monologue, and this goes with every piece of imagery the author gives you, you go in to your mind's eye, and you have to create the image of what you're talking about. The woman, your lover, you have to talk about that. So if you're going to talk about it, you have to create who she was in your mind. Now, why do we have to do that? That seems false. It seems fake. It seems like an actory thing to do. Well, I'll tell you the reason why. We've all had people come to us, right, and talk to us, and they're emphatic about what they're saying, and they're emphatic, and they're telling me a story, and they're telling it to me, and they're very emphatic. But somehow, as a listener, we get a kind of feeling when something's false, something's not right. We can't put our finger on it, but we know the story that they're telling us is not really true. We don't know why we know that. Okay, so that means there's some sort of artifice getting between you and the speaker. Well, then I look back at the way that I performed for so many years. My God, I was creating nothing but artifice. I didn't create anything real. I created this wonderful image in this wonderful tone in my voice and all that. And what I was really kind of doing is separating myself from the audience. And wouldn't you think that the audience can sit there and say, I can't put my finger on it, but there's something false here. Something's not right. And so then the audience sits back and says, well, that show was good. That was a good show. That actor's working really hard. He's great. He's fine, But there's no investment from the audience member. Because I just gave him a show. I didn't give him an experience. And the theater patron pays the ticket price for the experience. So what we need to remember as actors is our job is to create that experience for them. And we have to do this in meticulous and specific detail. Go back to the monologue about your lover. You had better know exactly what color hair she had, what color eyes she had, what dress she looked great in, when she looked the most beautiful, when she looked sick, what the smell of the nape of her neck looked like, what it felt like just to hold her. Because once you create that person in your mind's eye, and you only need to do it once, it's locked away. It's locked back in a memory of your brain. Now, we know this kind of imagery works. The reason why we know this kind of imagery works is because scientists started to discover in the 1960s and the 1970s, they started to discover the kinesiology of how the brain processes information. And one of the ways the brain processes information is the right part of your brain is recall. The left part of your brain is construction. For example, if we were all at a bar together and something happened, and when I say to you, hey, remember the thing that happened across the street at that bar? You would go up and to the right of your brain because you're remembering an event that happened. And you probably smile or react how that event is because you're reliving that event for that brief moment. But if I asked you, what did the bar look like inside, you would go up and to the left because now you're constructing. The bar looked like it had blue colors, brown chairs, things like that. You're constructing. There's no emotional memory there. When I ask you, what was the sound of your mother's favorite nursery rhyme when you were a child, your eyes would go to the side and to the right. When you think of sound, it's to the side. When I ask you if this sound cue will work in this particular part of a play, and I ask for your opinion, you'll go to the left and to the side to see if it actually works. You're constructing. You're not remembering what it sounded like. You're constructing, yeah, that sounds about right. And so when I ask you how you feel about something, your eyes naturally go down and to the left because you're constructing your feelings and trying to explain it. And then if you're really not sure, your eyes will go down and over to the right because you're having an internal dialogue about why I'm asking so many questions. Smell is up. So if I ask you, does this smell like lemon? You'd smell and go, yeah, that smells like lemon. Or if I said, hey, taste that wine. What do you think that tastes like? Tastes pretty good. Goes down for taste. The brain is hardwired, the eyes to the soul are hardwired to move when you process information. So what does this tell us? Okay, this tells us that's where the truth in acting is. That's where the truth is. So if you do the work of the imagery and you create your ex-lover, it's stored up here. It's not stored over here. It's stored up here. The brain cannot tell the difference between a real image and a fake image. We know this from the flight or fight syndrome, right? If somebody calls you and says your loved one's been involved in an accident and you don't know anything other than that, and you're racing somewhere and everything's going through your mind, all of a sudden the next thing you know, your heartbeat goes up, your palms start to sweat, your beads of sweat on your brow, suddenly your body is reacting as if it's true and you don't know, but it's reacting to the images that you're creating. And so for the actor, the real work goes back to the story that I told you. Our job is to give them the experience of our character. That is our job. The only way to do it truthfully is to go through the work, the painstaking work of creating every single image. And I tell you, it sounds like a lot of work, but it's the easiest thing in the world to do because you only need to do it once. See, when I create the full image of my former lover and I've got it all there, I don't need to worry how to say the line. I don't need to worry about how to say the line. I don't need to memorize, well, I said this way, or something. I just let it happen as I see it in my mind's eye. And when I start to talk about that person, the person will flash in your brain, the image will come for that brief second, and it'll shape the way you say your line. But more importantly, for the moment that you see that in your mind's eye, every person in the audience saw her too. And that's why they pay the ticket price. So I leave you with this. As a patron, I come in to ride the experience of what's happening here. That's why theater is so important. That's why people still go to the theater when they can stay home and watch TV and watch movies. This is a living thing that we can do here, but the actor has to do their part so the audience can feel and live and experience it. And then when you do the work and you live in that environment that you've created everything, then the audience goes, instead of going, yeah, that actor was really good, they kind of go, that actor was really good, because you've moved them. They've lived with you. They've shared a ride with you. That's why we come in, we suspend our disbelief, and we pray that the actor on the stage is going to do their part of this exchange. You pay the $25 ticket price, and you hope, and you pray that they've done it. And when they do it, there's nothing better in theater than this, because for the hour and a half to 2 hours that you sat here, you actually got to live all the experiences of everyone on stage. And I'll tell you right now, as an actor, if you don't do it, you're telling everybody in the audience, I'm false. And they know it. They just don't know why they know it. So I leave you, please, do your imagery work. And remember the phrase, the patron doesn't pay $25 to see you talk. They pay $25 to see you think so they can experience what the author's given them. Thank you.